The year was 1916. The season was autumn, but it was an autumn with a chill that bit deeper than usual in the Blue Ridge Mountains. The leaves on the oaks and maples did not turn to gold and fire. They turned a sickly brown and clung to the branches, rattling like old bones. The wind howled through the hollows. It sounded like a hungry animal. People in the nearby town of Elkhorn said it was a bad sign. They said the woods were uneasy. Something was not right. The air felt heavy, and a strange quiet fell over the forest when the wind wasn't blowing. It was the kind of quiet that makes the hair on your arms stand up. The sun was a pale disk in a gray sky. It gave little warmth. The birds seemed to have left weeks early. Usually, the woods would still be alive with their songs, but now there was only silence. The squirrels, usually busy gathering nuts, were nowhere to be seen. Old Man Hemlock, who had lived in Elkhorn for 80 years, spat tobacco juice on the ground. He said, "The woods are holding their breath, waiting for something bad." The streams ran low and dark. The water looked black, even in the middle of the day. The feeling of dread was as thick as the coming fog. Even the animals that stayed seemed strange. Deer would stand frozen at the edge of the woods, staring into town with wide, frightened eyes. They would not run, even when people got close. They just stood there trembling. Then, as if waking from a trance, they would bolt back into the shadows of the trees. The nights came on fast and cold. The moon was often hidden by thick, dark clouds. The people of Elkhorn bolted their doors a little tighter. They added another log to the fire. They tried not to listen to the sounds the wind made as it scraped against their windows. A strange fog would roll down from the high peaks some nights. It was not a normal fog. It was thick and oily, and it carried a smell. It smelled of damp earth and something else, something like old meat left too long in the sun. The fog would swallow the trees and the paths. It made the world small and close. It made you feel trapped. The people knew the mountains had their moods. They knew the signs of a hard winter. But this was different. This was something they had never felt before. This was a fear that came from the land itself. Living deep within those whispering woods was a man named Morai Hagerty. He was not like the other trappers. The other trappers came to town for supplies and company. They laughed and told stories. Morai Hagerty did not. He was a tall, thin man. He looked like a tree that had been struck by lightning. His face was all sharp angles and shadows. His eyes were the color of a winter sky just before a storm. They were pale and empty. He never looked you in the eye. He always looked at something just past your shoulder, as if he saw something there that you could not. He lived alone in a small, rough cabin about a day's walk from Elkhorn. No one knew where he came from. He just appeared one spring, built his cabin, and started his trap lines. He wore clothes made of dark, patched hides. They always seemed to be damp. He had a long, tangled beard that was more gray than black. He moved with a strange, jerky gait. It was like he was always fighting to keep his balance. When he walked, he made no sound. One moment the path would be empty. The next, he would be there. He was like a ghost slipping through the trees. The other trappers gave him a wide berth. Hagerty had odd habits. He didn't set his traps where the other men did. He placed them in strange, isolated spots, deep in thickets no one else would bother with, or high on rocky ledges that were hard to reach. He wasn't trapping for beaver or fox, not primarily. He seemed to be trapping for things that didn't have names. Sometimes he would be seen standing perfectly still in a clearing for hours. He would just stand there, head cocked, as if listening to a conversation no one else could hear. He never carried a rifle. Only a long, curved knife that shone dully at his hip. The children of Elkhorn were terrified of him. They told stories about him. They said he could talk to the crows. They said he never slept. They said he ate things he found raw in the woods. The adults hushed them, but they had their own whispers. They said he was touched in the head, or maybe he was running from something. Whatever the truth was, everyone agreed on one thing. Morai Hagerty was not a man you wanted to meet alone in the woods, especially not when the days were getting shorter and the nights were getting colder. He was a part of the strangeness, not a victim of it. The people of Elkhorn talked about Morai Hagerty. They talked in hushed tones at the general store. They talked over their fences. Their words were filled with suspicion and fear. Martha Gable, who ran the mercantile, would shiver when his name was mentioned. "He comes in here, that Hagerty," she'd say, wiping her hands on her apron. "He don't say hello, he just points. His fingers are long, and his nails are yellow and thick, like claws. He makes me cold cold all over, a cold that has nothing to do with the weather." Her voice would drop to a whisper. "He never blinks, not once." Jedediah Pope, a trapper who had lines near Hagerty's territory, had his own stories. He would tell them at the tavern, his voice low. "I was checking my lines near Black Creek," Jedediah said one night. "I heard a sound. It was a chanting sound, low and guttural. I crept through the trees to see. It was him, Hagerty. He was standing in a circle of stones he'd made. He was chanting at the moon, and the words, they weren't any words I'd ever heard. They made my blood run cold. I got out of there. I didn't even check the rest of my traps that day." Even the town's children had tales to tell. Young Samuel Pike swore he saw Hagerty one evening. "I was looking for our cow, Bessie," the boy stammered, his eyes wide. "She'd wandered near the woods. I saw Mr. Hagerty by the old oak. He wasn't alone. There were things with him, shadows. They were tall and thin, like him. And they moved when he moved. They didn't have faces. He was talking to them. He was pointing toward the town. I ran all the way home, and I didn't look back." Most people dismissed it as a child's fantasy. But the story spread. It added another layer to the fear. The town blacksmith, a large, no-nonsense man named Silas Croft, was a skeptic. But even he had to admit something was off. "I don't hold with ghost stories," Silas would grunt, hammering a hot piece of iron. "But I saw him once, walking along the ridge at dusk. The sun was going down behind him. For a second, he looked wrong, too tall, too thin. His shadow stretched all the way down the mountain. It looked like a long black hand reaching for the town. It was just a trick of the light, I'm sure, but it was a trick I won't soon forget." The strangeness was not just in Morai Hagerty's actions. It was in the woods themselves. Reports started coming in from hunters and trappers. They were finding things that made no sense. On the trunks of ancient pine trees, strange markings would appear overnight. They were not carvings made by a knife. They looked as if they had been burned into the wood. They were complex symbols, spirals that turned in on themselves, jagged lines that looked like lightning, and something that looked like a stick figure with too many arms. No one knew what they meant, but they felt evil. Then there were the noises. The woods, which were often so quiet, would suddenly come alive at night, but not with the familiar sounds of owls and crickets. These were different sounds. People heard high, thin wails that drifted on the wind. They sounded like a woman crying in pain. Others heard a deep, rhythmic thumping. It sounded like a giant heart beating slowly in the earth. Jedediah Pope said he heard chattering noises one night. It sounded like dozens of people talking at once, but their voices were dry and raspy, like leaves skittering across stone. He said it didn't sound human. The animals' behavior became even more bizarre. Flocks of crows would gather in the trees above Hagerty's cabin. They would sit there for hours, completely silent. Then, all at once, they would burst into the air, cawing and screaming, and fly away. Hunters found deer with their antlers tangled in thorn bushes, dead from exhaustion. They found foxes and rabbits lying in clearings, untouched by predators, their bodies stiff and their eyes wide with terror. It was as if they had been scared to death. The natural order of the forest was coming undone. The most disturbing discoveries were the carcasses. A hunter found 3 coyotes. Their bodies had been laid out in a perfect triangle. Their throats were torn out, but there was no blood on the ground. Another man found a circle of dead squirrels. There were 20 of them. They were laid on their backs, their paws pointing toward the sky. In the center of the circle was a single black feather. These were not the doings of a natural predator. This was something else, something deliberate and ritualistic. And everyone in Elkhorn knew whose cabin was closest to these terrible sights. As October bled into November, the first snows began to fall. They were not gentle flakes. They were hard, icy pellets that stung the skin. The winter was coming on fast and mean. People began to truly worry about anyone still out in the mountains, even a man as strange as Morai Hagerty. His last visit to Elhorn was one that no one would forget. It was a week before the first big storm hit. He came into Martha Gable's mercantile, the wind howling at his back. He looked wilder than ever. His eyes were wide and frantic. There were fresh scratches on his face. He didn't just point this time, he spoke. His voice was a dry, rasping whisper. It sounded like stones grinding together. "I need salt," he rasped. "All you have?" Martha was taken aback. She sold him her entire barrel of rock salt. It was an enormous amount for one man. Then he asked for something else. "Iron nails," he whispered, "long ones, and twine, a lot of twine." He bought every long nail she had in stock, and 3 large spools of heavy twine. His hands trembled as he paid with a few worn coins. His odd purchases made a chill run down Martha's spine. He didn't leave right away. He stood by the door, looking out at the gray, angry sky. He seemed to be listening. Then he turned to Martha. His pale eyes seemed to look right through her. "Do you hear them?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "They're getting louder. They're hungry." Before Martha could ask what he meant, he was gone. He slipped out the door and was swallowed by the swirling snow. Martha stood frozen behind her counter for a long time. The only sound was the frantic beating of her own heart. What was Hagerty doing with all that salt and iron? His questions were as strange as his purchases. Before he left the store, he grabbed Martha's arm. His grip was surprisingly strong. It felt like cold iron. "If you see symbols," he hissed, "don't follow them. If you hear your name called from the woods, don't answer. It's a trap." He stared at her for a moment longer, his eyes full of a terror she could not comprehend. Then he released her and vanished. The encounter left Martha Gable shaking. She told the sheriff. She told her neighbors. Hagerty's words were not a warning. They sounded like a desperate plea or a confession. After Hagerty's last visit, the fear in Elhorn grew into something solid. You could almost touch it. The snow came down hard, blanketing the mountains in a thick layer of white. The town felt isolated, cut off from the rest of the world. Hagerty's strange words echoed in everyone's minds. "They're hungry." Who was they? People started hearing things. A woman swore she heard her son's name being called from the edge of the woods, even though the boy was safe inside. A man out chopping wood heard a soft whisper right behind him, but when he turned, there was nothing there but falling snow. The tension became unbearable. Neighbors started looking at each other with suspicion. The woods that surrounded them, once a source of livelihood, now felt like a prison. The trees seemed to watch the town. Their bare branches looked like skeletal fingers. The strange markings were now appearing closer to town. One was found burned into the door of the church. The preacher declared it the work of the devil. People nailed horseshoes over their doors. They stuffed salt into the cracks around their windows. The things Hagerty had bought were now being used by the very people who feared him. Sheriff Brody was a practical man. He didn't believe in mountain spirits or demons. He believed in hard winters and lonely men going mad. "It's just Hagerty," he told the worried townspeople. "He's lost his mind from being alone. He's the one making the noises and the marks. Once this storm breaks, I'll go up there and bring him in." But his words did little to calm their fears. The sheriff was a good man, but he was one man, and the fear in the town was bigger than one man. It was an ancient fear, the fear of the dark, the fear of the unknown that lives just beyond the firelight. The people demanded action. They didn't want to wait for the storm to break. What if Hagerty was doing something terrible up on that mountain? What if he was the cause of the bad omens, the harsh winter, the sickness in the land? Or what if he was in trouble? What if the things he was afraid of were real? Either way, they couldn't just sit and wait. The fear was worse than the storm. A group of men gathered at the tavern. They were armed with rifles and lanterns. They were tired of being afraid. They decided they would go up the mountain themselves. They would find Morai Hagerty's cabin and get some answers. Sheriff Brody knew he couldn't stop them. The men's fear had turned to a grim resolve. If he didn't lead them, they would go without him. So, on a bitterly cold morning, a search party of a dozen men gathered in the center of Elhorn. The sky was white. The air was still and frigid. Their breath plumed in front of them. They carried lanterns, even though it was morning. The light was flat and gray, and shadows lurked everywhere. They had rifles, axes, and coils of rope. They looked like they were going to war. In a way, they were. A war against the unknown. Jedediah Pope, the trapper, agreed to be their guide. He knew the trails better than anyone, but even he looked nervous. His eyes kept scanning the silent, snow-covered trees that lined the town. The trail to his cabin ain't easy, he warned, and with this snow, it's treacherous. We stick together. No one wanders off, no matter what you see, no matter what you hear. The men nodded grimly. The wives and children watched from their windows. Their faces were pale with worry. They watched the small group of men march out of town and disappear into the vast, white silence of the woods. The forest was unnaturally quiet. The snow muffled every sound. The only noise was the crunch of their boots and the heavy sound of their own breathing. The trees were laden with snow, their branches drooping like the arms of tired old men. The world was nothing but black and white. Black tree trunks and white snow. As they walked deeper, a sense of unease settled over the party. It felt like they were being watched. Every snap of a twig, every gust of wind that shook snow from a branch made them jump. The air grew colder, and the silence seemed to press in on them. The journey was slow and difficult. The snow was deep, and the trail was hard to find. As they pushed on, the feeling of dread grew stronger. They were walking into the heart of the mystery. They were heading toward the source of the town's fear. What would they find at Morai Hagerty's cabin? Would they find a madman, a victim, or would they find something else entirely? The sun was a weak spot in the white sky. It was getting late. As they finally crested a ridge and saw a thin curl of smoke rising in the distance, they knew they were close. But no one felt relief. They only felt a deeper, colder fear. The story was not over. It was just beginning.